United States congressional hierarchy, that is, the United States Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee ranks no lower than being the second or third most powerful person in the Congress. And none of us here today will see another chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee from Chicago or even Illinois, from either party in our lifetime, the likes of the chairman, who's going to introduce our speaker, Dan Rostenkowski. Mr. Chairman. Have some fun up here.
If Rahm Emanuel is in the audience, I know your heart is broken. For those of you that don't know it, he's on the Ways and Means Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a real treat for me. I'm kind of a Neanderthal man in politics. I sit by my phone and wait for reporters to call me to ask me questions about previous administrations. And I sit there and I think, well, did you talk to Tom Donovan? Did you talk to Ken Sane? Did you talk to Ray Simon? Well, who are those people? Now, if a reporter doesn't know who those three people are, he's not much of a reporter because they were all high aides to Mayor Daley. And it's amazing how many people want to learn about Mayor Richard J. Daley these days. But that's not my purpose here. Mine is to give you a little briefing on the personal person that is presently the Assistant Majority Leader in the Senate. And I say this with hesitancy because in my memory and lifetime, Scott Lucas was the Majority Leader, and of course, you know, he got beat. Alan Dixon was the Majority Whip, and of course, you know, he got beat. I just asked the President Assistant Majority Leader who he was running against. Now, Jesus, Dick, don't get beat by this guy. You know, politics is strange, and more strange these days than it's ever been. You need a scorecard to know who the players are. You need a program to find out when, in fact, some of the legislative bodies are in session in Washington. But basically, a man's word in this game is probably the most important. And I'm not going to take up the good senator's time, but I'm just going to recite one situation in which I found myself exposed to Dick Durbin. Dick came to Washington in 1982 under the second year of Ronald Reagan's quote-unquote fabulous service. After several years in Washington, he wanted to move from the committee on which he served to the Appropriations Committee. It was at this time that Illinois and Chicago had two seats on the Appropriations Committee. Chicago. And it was pretty obvious that Sidney Yates, who was sitting on the Appropriations Committee, was going to be leaving. Well, in the contest for that seat, I was pretty influential in the politics of it, putting coalitions together. In one contest, the candidacy of Dick Durbin and another person from another state was in was in contention, and we had 2 rounds of the electioning going, and on both occasions, Dick Durbin and this other person were tied. One of the other members of the Illinois delegation, Marty Russo, came over to me and said, "Boss, I think one of our own is not voting for Dick Durbin." I said, "You got to be kidding me." He says, "No, I think there's an agreement here between the California Subcommittee Chairman on Commerce and this lady on our team had some coalition." I said, "Marty, you can't be serious." So I walked over to the young lady and I said, "Madam, I don't know whether it's true, but if the next time around Dick Durbin isn't elected to the Appropriations Committee, you ain't going to be in Congress." Now, I don't know why people would assume that I'm coarse, brazen, forward. Do you want to know something? It's amazing. It's amazing how you get things done. What do you think happened in the next election? Dick Durbin got on the Appropriations Committee. But now the chemistry of the individual. Having not a seat on that committee to Chicago is devastating. Having not a representative on that committee to Chicago is mind-boggling and embarrassing to me, who was chairman of the slate-making operation. I went to Richard and I said, "Dick, I know that this is going to be difficult for you, but I'm going to ask for a commitment. I hope that you, as our only representative on this committee, is going to remember that Chicago kind of wags the tail of the dog of this state. I know you're from Springfield, and I know you have commitments down there." I said, "But I always want you to remember Chicago, if not first, at least tied for first." He said to me, "Mr. Chairman," put his hand out, shook my hand, and ladies and gentlemen, Chicago did better with Dick Durbin on the Appropriations Committee than it had ever done before. Now, that's the chemistry of the individual, and it never changed. It never changed. Another incident, Durbin came to me and said, "I'm going to run for the Senate." I said, "Oh, Jesus, Dick, what are you doing?" "No, Dan," he says, "you don't know what it's like in the House of Representatives when you're in the minority. You feel like you're in absolutely nothing." He said, "At least in the Senate, you can do things. You can do things." I said, "Dick, you know, you break my heart, but if that's the course you're going to take, good luck to you." Well, he was right and I was wrong. Look at him today, Assistant Majority Leader in the greatest legislative body in the world, the United States Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, our Senator, Dick Durbin.
Thank you, Dan. Well, it's all true. But he didn't tell you the first part, and that is when I got elected. I barely got elected. 1982, I'd lost 3 straight elections. And so I came along, and I met with him in his office, his hallowed office, and I picked out my committee assignments. I said I needed to be on the Agriculture Committee and Science and Tech. He said, "What?" I said, "Agriculture." And he said, "Oh, sure." So he took care of that. And then he came to me one day, leaning on the rail, and he says, "You planning on sticking around here?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "You barely won. You may lose, huh?" I said, "No, I think I can get reelected." "Get reelected, call me. I'll see if I can get you on appropriations." So there was election night, and I'm calling everybody to thank him. And the first call's to this guy to tell him that I won a reelection by a good margin, was going to be around for a little while. But let me just say, he was a great friend and a great mentor. And when people talk about returning to that era in American politics, where both parties worked together. They're talking about the era of Dan Rostenkowski. There wasn't a major tax bill that came out of his committee that wasn't a bipartisan bill, most of them unanimous, before they came to the floor. Think about that today. It's almost inconceivable. And he and Bob Michel were such good buddies. Bob was on the other side as Republican leader. Back in the early days when they were just kids in Congress, they used to hop in the station wagon and drive back to Illinois on the weekends together. One of them sleeping in the back while the other one's driving, and I'm not kidding. That was a different era, and there were parts of it that I hope we can someday return to, because a lot more was accomplished in that era, and it was a lot nicer place to serve in the U.S. Congress. But Dan, thank you. Thank you personally for me, and thanks for all you've done for this state and for the city of Chicago. Appreciate it so much. I'm going to talk about a serious issue, and it's kind of a downer, but I hope not badly, in terms of what we're facing in this country, and then open it up to questions, which I think could go into a lot of different areas. But I want to just say a word, if I can, about this housing crisis that we face today. The CEO of Wells Fargo recently told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "We've not seen a nationwide decline in housing like this since the Great Depression." That's a direct quote. Now, Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson is a good guy. I like him. He came by my office, and he introduced himself and said he wanted to be Secretary of Treasury. And I said, all I ask you for is a yes or a no when I ask a question. You don't have to give me every answer I want, and return my phone calls. And we'll have a good relationship. He has been perfect ever since. Not agreeing with me on everything by a long shot, but responsive and hardworking and a good man. He comes home, of course, to Barrington on the weekends, which is his home, and gets back into his regular civilian life, and without any fanfare. Most people in Chicago don't even know that he makes the trip back and forth. But he's a good fella and Secretary of the Treasury. Ben Bernanke, who succeeded Greenspan at the Fed, I think is a very talented economist, and I think he is responsive as well. Both of them have said that this housing crisis is the most serious challenge facing our economy. The number of homes that have slipped into some stage of foreclosure last year jumped 79% over the year before. And Secretary Paulson said last week, when he was asked, are we likely to see more or fewer foreclosures in the coming years, he said the worst is just beginning. According to the Center for Responsible Lending, 2.2 million mortgages will face foreclosure in this country in the short time ahead. It's going to affect the property values of 44 million homeowners in America. These are people making their mortgage payments when the house down the block just went into foreclosure. All told, American families are expected to lose $202 billion in housing value over the next 2 years. This is a staggering loss when you consider that our homes have always been the safest investments. Everybody here, certainly my age, knew that if you push yourself to buy a home that cost a little bit more, it was always worth the effort. That home was going to go up in value, and that was going to become the most important asset. And in the recent years, we could borrow against that asset for remodeling or other purposes. Our homes became ATMs for a long, long time. When home values were rising and credit was easily available, families took advantage of that. Now credit's harder to come by. Many families are putting more on their charge cards. They're moving from terrible mortgage terms to even worse credit card terms. When I talked to the people on Wall Street who 8 months ago said, watch out for the subprime, and I didn't know what they were talking about. I knew there was a subprime market, but I didn't know it was going to collapse. They're now saying, watch out for credit cards, because that's the next wave of indebtedness. And credit card rates, as you know, interest rates are volatile. For no obvious reason, you can see the interest rate on your credit card go up dramatically. Every state's affected by this, but Illinois stands to be hit harder than most. Illinois is looking at the 7th highest number of foreclosures in the nation, the 4th worst reduction in housing values of all the states. The Center for Responsible Lending says 45,000 homes in Illinois will be lost to foreclosure next year. 2.5 million neighboring homes will lose value. Statewide, the loss in home values will exceed $15 billion of those in surrounding neighborhoods who will see the value of their homes go down. Cook County can be in for some hard times here. Cook County's projected loss in home values is the worst of any county in Illinois and the second worst of any county in America. We're already seeing record numbers of foreclosures, South Side and North Shore. By the end of 2009, it's projected that another 25,000 homes in Cook County will be lost to foreclosure, and nearly 1.8 million neighboring homes will lose value. What's the average hit on the value of your home from this in Cook County? $7,661. Your home value is going to go down through no fault of your own. That's about $1,500 more than the state average and about $2,700 more than the national average. Add it all up, Cook County is losing an overall amount in home value of $13.7 billion. Rufus, you know what I'm talking about here. We're talking about the property values, the assessed valuation, the money collected for schools, not just for Chicago Public Schools, but for all of the schools, districts in Cook County that are going to be negatively impacted through no fault of your own. On top of that, the U.S. Conference of Mayors estimates the mortgage crisis is going to cost Chicago $3.9 billion in lost economic activity this year. It's obvious. The housing industry is such an engine in our economy. When the housing market is flat, it isn't just the home builder and the developer who's in trouble. It's also the skilled craftsman. It's the contractor. It's the material man. It's the person selling appliances and carpeting and furniture. You go on and on. You can see how the ripple effect could have that dramatic negative impact. It isn't just a subprime crisis in our country. It is truly a national economic crisis, and I don't think we have focused on it as we should and seriously. This damage could wipe out the life savings of a lot of people. In Chicago, it could wipe out years of hard work and billions of dollars worth of investment in economic development and neighborhood revitalization. We need to manage this crisis wisely. I'm glad that Mayor Daley stepped forward when it comes to counseling. That's a really important part of this, and something I'll mention a little bit later when we talk about a federal response here. But he gets it. There are a lot of people out there scared to death to answer the phone and won't open the mail because they just missed their mortgage payment and they think the end is near. If they could get in touch with somebody and talk to them, there may be a way out of this mess. I also want to commend Lisa Madigan. Lisa Madigan has gone into an investigation of Countrywide. She's going after predatory lending. She's been very aggressive on this, and Governor Blagojevich just announced last week his own state effort. I'm sorry that it has to be done at the local and state level. We're not doing enough, as we should, in Washington. So far, what we've done hasn't been nearly enough. We passed an economic stimulus package, and that's good. It's a good first step. What we're trying to do is to get consumer confidence moving up. And so we want to put spending power in the hands of average people. At the end of the day, the House of Representatives reached an agreement, a bipartisan agreement with the president, in order to have this stimulus package provide a check of about $600 for individuals, $1,200 for families, and $300 for some in other income categories. It was a good start. In the Senate, we improved it. We included another 21 million people on Social Security who will receive the checks, and 250,000 disabled veterans. I think that's all well and good. And I think it will, I hope, start moving in May when the checks go forward, a little more consumer confidence into this equation. We tried to add another provision, which is historically, as Dan knows, we've always put in these recovery bills, and that is the extension of unemployment benefits. If unemployment is going up and people are having a tough time finding a job, you give them a few more weeks on unemployment so they can find their way out of this mess and get a decent job and get a paycheck. Well, the other party refused. They wouldn't allow us to extend unemployment benefits. I think that's short-sighted. It's one of the most dramatic and direct ways to inject money into the economy. You know a family unemployed is going to spend that money. They aren't going to bank it. They're going to spend it for the obvious necessities of life. I just came back last night from Rockford, and I went out to the Chrysler plant there at Belvedere, which you pass every time you go out there. And they have 3,000 people working there, but they've just laid off a third of them. In 2 weeks, they're finished. Now, 30% of those folks are going to retire, but the other 700 are on the streets. They get a pretty good paycheck from Chrysler right now. They're going to be really struggling in that part of our state to find a job that pays as much. And unfortunately, the administration just ruled they don't qualify for trade adjustment assistance. So the time will come for them and for other people in the area where the unemployment benefits are going to be an important part of keeping their families together during very difficult times. Now, what's the administration's response been? Unfortunately, I don't think it's strong enough when it comes to the housing crisis. We have heard from Secretary Paulson that he met with the industry and they came up and requested that they wanted voluntary guidelines to deal with this, to renegotiate the mortgages. I like Hank Paulson, but this is an anemic approach to an issue which is much larger. This was the catalyst that started driving us into this recession. And if we don't deal with this directly and aggressively, I'm afraid that the downturn is going to continue, and it could be very serious. The voluntary agreements that they're talking about now, they call it the Hope Now Plan. The Hope Now Plan would reach an estimated 3% of the 2.2 million homeowners facing foreclosure. Last week, they came up with something called Project Lifeline. That isn't really calibrated to reach many more in terms of future foreclosures. We are just not dealing with this as aggressively as we should. Students of history, I think, can legitimately hearken back, going back to the Wells Fargo quote, to the Depression, when we faced a serious economic challenge. And there were those who said, let's just ride it out. That happened to be Herbert Hoover, who lost the next election, to Franklin Roosevelt, who said, we've got to stand up and do something, maybe dramatic, but we've got to turn the economy around. I think we need that kind of leadership now. Let me tell you the story of one woman in Chicago and another one downstate who are going through foreclosure. Let me put a face on this for you. Nettie McGee lives on the South Side. African-American woman, worked her whole life in a little factory. She didn't get a pension out of it, but she saved up a few bucks, and she was going to retire and did retire on Social Security. With the money she saved, she bought the little house she'd always dreamed of. And there she was, retired with her little house. After she was in there a few years, and she was making her mortgage payments, and everything was just fine, there was a knock on the door, and a fellow came up and said, I just want to tell you, your home's going to be sold at a tax sale. She said, what are you talking about? I always pay my taxes. I pay them every month. No, you don't understand. You're living on 2 plots of land here. Your backyard is a separate piece of property, has its own tax bill that unfortunately has been mailed to the wrong address now for several years, and you're about to lose your backyard because the taxes haven't been paid. Well, she said, how much do I have to pay? It turned out to be $5,000. She didn't have anywhere near that amount. She didn't know where to turn. This is not a woman who went to college. She doesn't have great business experience and didn't have a lot of family people who could give her advice. But she saw on television a telephone number that she could call. And they said, we can consolidate your loans for you. So Nettie dialed this number. The next day, a man showed up at her home. 48 hours later, she's sitting at a closing. 48 hours later. She said it was a windowless room, and I went in it alone, and there was this big stack of papers, and the guy said, don't worry, you're going to pay less each month. It's not a problem. She said, I signed, and I signed, and I signed until my hand was so tired, I didn't know if I could sign anymore. And he said, it's all taken care of. Nice to meet you, Mrs. McGee, and off she went. So she makes the monthly payments, and there's no problem at all. She was making a payment of about $585 a month, and she could make that payment. And then, after 2 years, came the reset. And as a result of the reset, her monthly payment went up $300 a month. Now, most of us would not panic at $300 a month. She panicked. She couldn't make the payment. Her monthly payment was more than her total Social Security check. And she's about to lose her home. After working a lifetime to be at this position, that's what happened to her. Carol Thomas, Peoria, Illinois, met with her at a meeting just day before yesterday. Her husband got sick. They were both retired. She'd worked at Osco Drugs her whole life. Kind of person, a cashier that you see at all these drugstores. Nice lady, husband a nice guy. And there they were retired. And then her husband got sick. So sick that he couldn't climb the stairs to get up to the second floor to the bedroom. She thought to myself, I got to find a place where he can be comfortable and a single, level place for us. And she finds a little house. And she buys into the house and she's doing just fine. And then he dies. And he dies leaving some medical bills. And she needs some money. And so a friend, a business advisor, suggests to her it's time to consolidate your loans. That is when the nightmare began. She took a 0% loan that she had received from the city for siding and insulation on her home, a 0% loan, and this fellow packaged it in the consolidated loan, so she's now paying interest on the 0% loan. It has reached the point where she's hit reset, and she can't make the monthly payments, and she's about to lose the home. These are 2 real-life stories right here in Chicago and downstate of people who I feel, through no fault of their own, were drawn into situations where they weren't told the circumstances and what they might face, and now face a real personal tragedy. That's the reality of what this crisis is about for many people. Now, there are others, don't get me wrong, who just made stupid decisions and knew it, big risks, and they were willing to take them. I don't have a lot of sympathy for those folks. But when you hear these stories, you think there has to be a better way. I think there are things we can do. And starting next week, we're going to have a package in Washington that I think addresses this from several different angles. First, more money for counseling so that people like Nettie McGee and Carol Thomas can get some help. I might tell you, Nettie McGee doesn't have a chance under anything announced by this administration. She missed by 5 weeks, the only 2 programs that have been announced. She can't qualify. She signed up for her mortgage a little too late, 5 weeks, so she's not covered by anything at this point. But we need more counseling so people can reach out and give these folks a helping hand. The second thing we need to do is to provide more loan authority to the federal housing agencies so that they can put some liquidity into this market so that those who can afford to stay can have a refinancing with a government guarantee at an interest rate they can live with. That's an important part of it. In addition to that, I have a provision in here. If some of you practice law and go to bankruptcy court, you may be aware of this, but most people aren't. If I would declare bankruptcy tomorrow and own 3 pieces of property when I go into bankruptcy court, one of them is my home, the other one is my vacation condo in Florida, which I don't have, incidentally, a vacation condo in Florida, and the third one is a little farm that my family had downstate, okay? 3 pieces of property. And I walk in there and I'm bankrupt. I can't pay my bills. And the bankruptcy judge sits down and says, okay, now what we're going to do for the farm downstate is we're going to do what's called a cram down. We're going to renegotiate the terms of that mortgage so you can keep your little farm downstate. The court can do that. We'll impose those terms. Now, for your vacation condo in Florida, we're going to do the same thing. We think you've got an income coming in and you can pay if you only paid a lower interest rate or if you had a longer period of time, we can take care of that. But under the law, that court cannot change the terms of your home mortgage if you're facing foreclosure. You can do it for the condo, do it for the farm, but not for your home. We estimate that 600,000 of the 2.2 million foreclosures are going to end up in bankruptcy court. And what we're trying to do is give the court the same authority to renegotiate the terms of the loan. Now, if you're sitting on the other side of the table, you say, Durbin, wait a minute. You're going to end up giving this person a mortgage on their home under terms which the lender may not be treated fairly. No, we put in there that you cannot bring the value of this mortgage any lower than the fair market value of the home. So that is the ultimate protection for the lender. There isn't a bank or financial institution that won't tell you that going into foreclosure costs a lot of money, and at the end of the day, the property is sold at something less than fair market value. And they'll also tell you that most banks are not in the business of cutting grass and washing windows. They don't want to maintain property. So this, I think, is a provision that can help. And the final thing that we're proposing is this. You ought to be able to go to a closing, and I've been a lawyer at real estate closings. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And look at that stack of paper and see one cover sheet. Jack Reed of Rhode Island has proposed this, and I think it makes sense. That cover sheet ought to state in clear terms the following. This is the amount of money you are borrowing. This is the interest rate. This is your monthly payment. That can change, if it can change, to a monthly payment that would go up to whatever level it's going to go up to. Your interest rate can change, going up to a higher level. And finally, is there a prepayment penalty on your mortgage? Those 5 or 6 things ought to be clear in plain English for everybody before you turn the first page at a real estate closing. And it ought to be signed off by everybody at the closing. I don't think that disclosure, that kind of disclosure is radical. I think it's kind of basic information that everybody, Nettie McGee and Carol Thomas and my family and yours ought to be entitled to. So we're going to try to move this. I don't know if we'll be successful, but I think if we don't zero in on this housing crisis, we are not going to put this economy back on its feet. Watch what's happening to the stock market. Watch people with their 401ks and their IRAs looking at their retirement and life savings diminishing day after day and week after week and saying, when will it end? I don't think it'll end with a $600 rebate check in May. I think it's going to take more. It's going to take a housing program, and this, I think, will be a good start. And if this doesn't work, we need to do more. We've got to get this housing industry back on its feet. So let me close by saying that this will be brought up by the Democratic leadership in the Senate next week. We're going to start the debate, try to pass it. I don't know if the administration will accept it. I'm not sure they will. But I will just predict to you that as we get closer to the election, if it appears that we're moving closer to a recession, if the economy's in a real downturn, everybody knows the politics of it. Everybody who's been a candidate in this room knows what I'm talking about. If you're the party in power and the economy is going into the tank, you're going to suffer in that election. And my guess is that the rebate check was the first effort by this administration to stop that from happening, and they may be drawn to a second stage dealing with the housing crisis. So thank you all very much. Let me take some questions from the floor.
It is a short question. Kosovo declared independence on Sunday. We in the United States are supporting Kosovo. Certain allies of ours aren't supporting the independence of Kosovo. What is your assessment on what's going to be going on in Kosovo?
Britain, France, Germany, and the United States have all recognized Kosovo. Russia is upset with the independence of Kosovo at this point. We've waited years and years for this moment, and I think we felt that it's inevitable that there would be independence. But there is tension built into this. The ethnic hostility and strife, all of the things that happened in the past, were kind of focused on this religious and ethnic split between Kosovo and Serbia. I think we're doing the right thing. I think the people in Kosovo are entitled to an opportunity to have their own country and their own independence. I know that there are many, you mentioned as we were coming in, there are many other places in the world where that argument's being made, the Basques and Spain and other places. But I think in this circumstance, it may be the only way for ultimate stability. So I think if we show strength behind Kosovo at this point, that they will be able to make it.
Do you think we might have to send troops? I mean, there were...
That is obviously the last thing I
Yeah.
want to see. Once we send troops into a country like that and that kind of strife, we're not sure how it ends.
Okay, thanks.
Any other
There's nobody behind me. I was getting out of the way.
intimidating? Kathy?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
There was an election last night in Wisconsin. I don't know if you all
Yeah.
noticed. On the off chance that somebody might ask about it, let me tell you where we are. We being those who support my Senate colleague. And he was ahead 138 delegates going into this election yesterday. I don't know what will net. But if you want to be looking at this from the inside instead of the outside, you have to understand the dynamic of electing delegates. We have a proportional system, which means it's hard to come out empty-handed. You always end up with something. And it also means it's hard to score a victory where you come out with a large share of delegates. To give you an illustration, back on Super Tuesday, New Jersey was a hard-fought state. And at the end of the day, Senator Clinton won New Jersey and was very proud of that win, along with New York and California, 3 of the 13 states that she's carried so far. She netted 9 delegates out of New Jersey because although she won, it wasn't by a huge margin. Now, in the state of Maine, they had a caucus a little over a week ago, and Barack Obama swept the caucus, had a winning margin of more than 20%. He netted 6 delegates out of Maine. So her margin of victory in New Jersey was worth 9. He picked up 6. He also swept the vote in Kansas and ended up with 10 delegates over Senator Clinton. Kansas and Maine turned out to be as important or more important than the state of New Jersey. From this point forward, for Senator Clinton to move back into a competitive position, she not only needs to win, she needs to win decisively. So far, in 16 of the 25 states that Barack has carried, he's had a margin of around 20% or more. Yesterday, he had a margin of 18% in Wisconsin, 51% in Hawaii. So if you're handicapping this and trying to analyze it, it isn't just who carries Texas or who carries Ohio. For Senator Clinton to make this the Alamo and turn it around, she has to have a huge winning margin to make the delegate numbers change. Now, a word about superdelegates. I happen to be one, and as Donna Brazil said, I'm not able to leap a tall building in a single bound. The superdelegates, Dan, you'll remember, created in 1984 as a favor to members of Congress. We said to the Democratic National Committee, what a pain in the neck of this is. We not only have to run every 2 years, we have to run every 4 years to be delegates to our own convention, and we have to run against our friends, our Democrats at home. Give us a break. They said, you got it. You're a delegate, you don't have to run, you get to vote. And so there we were with our pretty delegate badges walking through the front door of the convention hall, and in all the time since, never facing a serious vote. I can't remember one vote on the floor in all the conventions I've been to where they said, this is close, you better stay close by. It just never happened. And now it's different. 796 superdelegates, Democratic members of the House and Senate, governors, party officials, and all the rest of them, all of us are qualified to vote. It's actually 795. because when Joe Lieberman announced for John McCain, he lost his superdelegate status. But the question is, what happens to superdelegates?
Are you attacking Mr. Lieberman?
Not at all. It's just a fact. Just a fact.
If he switches parties, you are the minority.
That's exactly right. We love Joe Lieberman. He's entitled to do what he wants on the weekends. So the 795 superdelegates are not bound by anything. We can change our minds every day of the week, and we can even change our mind on the floor of the convention. And so the question is, what happens? Well, if there is a clear plurality in elected delegates for Barack, for example, or even for Senator Clinton, and the superdelegates overturn it, I think we're in for trouble. I think the party splits up. I think a lot of people say that's not the way we do business and walk away. It diminishes our vote and diminishes the momentum we've created. So I hope the superdelegates follow the elected delegates. Answering my own question, please. Thank you very much.
How does your bill address the coupling of 100% mortgages with variable rates? That seems to me it's just a recipe for disaster. Home values, buy a home, the value is going to go up, or it's going to stay the same, or it's going to go down. 2 out of 3 chances, you're going to lose.
Well, if you go, I think the term is upside down. If the value of your home diminishes to such a point that the mortgage is bigger than the home, people are walking away for obvious reasons. Why do I want to keep paying for something that isn't worth nearly the debt that I have on it? I'd rather just walk away from it and lose it. And that is a possibility. The whole mortgage world has changed so dramatically. Carol Thomas, I mentioned to you in Peoria, had an interest-only mortgage. You know, and she was gambling. She didn't realize she was gambling, that the value of her home would continue to increase. And when it stopped increasing, and the reset hit, the bottom fell out for her. She couldn't refinance at that point. So I think we've got to step back. There was a time, I remember when Loretta and I bought our first home, you better have 10% down. And you're going to have a fixed rate mortgage, 30 years, maybe 25, and you know what you're in for. And incidentally, you just borrowed the money from the bank down the street. Remember Charlie? Charlie's always going to be there if you got a question. What a different world today. You can borrow more than the home is worth, or at least you could. You could pay only interest. The interest rate may change if you bought an ARM. And it's not Charlie down the street. It's another new company every 6 months sending you notice that start making the checks out for this company. So I think we've got to get back to the point where we have sensible regulation of this industry. I think what we see here reflects an attitude in Washington that has to change. This notion that getting government off our back was in vogue for a long time, but when it comes to the safety of the food that we just ate at that table, we pray to God government somewhere taking a look at it to make sure that it isn't contaminated or dangerous. When it comes to the toys you bought for your kids last Christmas, lead paint is an issue for my grandchild and for children across America. When it comes to Enron, energy deregulation created a crisis across this country. And now, of course, we see the housing situation. We need the appropriate amount of regulation to keep the system honest, because otherwise this great free market, this engine, which is so good for us in general terms and in the long run, will go to excesses. And when they go to excesses, we pay a better price.
I'm hoping my question will be moot in a year, but I work for a small not-for-profit. My husband just started a small business in Rockford, and insurance is a big problem. Last year, you had a wonderful bill for small employers. Could you tell me what happened with that?
Yes, and here's, you've heard all of us in Congress and even Brock and Hillary say every American should be entitled to health insurance as good as every member of Congress has today. And I believe that. And what we have today, for all federal employees, members of Congress are treated like other federal employees when it comes to health insurance, is the Federal Employees Health Benefit Program. And what it says to Loretta and me, each year we have an open enrollment period, always, every single year, where we can choose from 9 different private health insurance plans that sell to federal employees who live in Illinois. So we pick the plan we like. We're at an age where we've got a plan that covers more. Younger people take a plan that covers less. And you decide how much you're going to take, and that is going to dictate how much they take out of your check each month. Sensible plan. And if you don't like the way you're treated, guess what? Next September you can change companies. And I have. People have done that. Why don't we expand that model? At least that's what this bill says. Why don't we expand that model for small businesses so that they will have an opportunity to shop in a common market for private health insurance instead of being told by your broker, I'm sorry, because of your business experience and the like, you only have one choice, and it's pretty expensive. So that's what we've been working on. We've been working on it for years, and it's hard. But the good news is we are now sitting down with two of the most unlikely allies trying to work this out, realtors. Turns out 50% of realtors in the United States don't have health insurance. Wouldn't think of that, would you? But most of those are like independent contractors who don't have health insurance. And secondly, a group which has historically not been on the side of any Democrats, the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, whose new CEO said, I took the job, left my company after I sold it, and he says, for one reason, I want to get health insurance for small business. So we are trying to work it out. We're close, and I think in the next week or two, we'll introduce a bill. We've got Senator Snowe of Maine on board, Senator Lincoln of Arkansas, and we're trying to build this. It's only one part of it, and it's a big, big issue. But I think small businesses, if they can be given help through the tax code to provide health insurance for their employees, and we can put some competition into this to try to keep the costs down, that ultimately we can cover a lot more people.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Durbin, for coming and speaking to us today. I'm with the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, and so your news about the mortgage and housing crisis is very disturbing to me, as it surely is to everyone in this room. We're naturally concerned that it's going to increase the already egregious numbers of people that are homeless. And as community organizers, I don't like to get in a room with a lot of people without a takeaway. And I feel like the challenge is that for our constituency, the homeless and people struggling on the streets, you know, how do we get them engaged to talk about a mortgage crisis when they don't own a home, and what and for people who are currently in homes but may be in a dire situation, they don't self-identify that they could become homeless, because that is the type of, you know, phenomenon that no one ever believes could happen to them. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions about what can citizens do to kind of put pressure or to make this discussion, you know, a little bit more tangible, because, you know, statistics don't seem to you know, do the story justice. When you brought up the two women in Peoria and Chicago, that really hit home. That's flesh and blood. Those are people caught in unfortunate situations. So I'm looking for something to go back and energize the people that I represent. And so I didn't know if you had any suggestions for what we could do.
When it comes to the homeless, there are a variety of ways they need help. Many of them have other issues that affect their lives, whether it's mental illness or an addiction. And you have to deal with those in tandem with the issue of homelessness. Otherwise, it's just impossible. You can help them a night at a time or a week at a time, but for those folks, they need that extra helping hand. And I think we need to do a heck of a lot more. There's some folks here from Haymarket, where are y'all? Doing a great job when it comes to the addiction issues. And all of these things, I think, are part of the answer. Then putting a roof over their heads is important, and that's going to take a government effort to expand the opportunities available, whether it's SROs or some other living arrangement. And unfortunately, and I just put it on the line to you, when you're waging a war that costs $4 billion a week, $4 billion a week, you cut back on programs like programs for the homeless. It was one of the first casualties in this budget. The money's just not there to expand housing opportunities for poor people or for those in lower income categories. And until this war comes to an end, and we stop spending in the range of $200 billion a year, not paid for, $200 billion a year, not paid for, and adding that to our national debt, we are going to be squeezing and reducing a lot of programs that would help. In terms of the point you made about people seeking help if they're about to lose a home, it's not only embarrassing, but it's scary if you're about to lose your home. And that's why people kind of, you know, pull the covers over their head and say, I'm not talking to anybody. Maybe something will happen that'll be good. And that's the worst thing they can do, to go on for months at a time, get so deep into it that they have no way out. Incidentally, this Carol Thomas I told you about, this poor lady didn't know which way to turn and called GMAC Mortgage, which is where she had her mortgage. And the person said, well, we're going to have to refinance your mortgage, so don't make the monthly payment, the next one. She said, I got the money. She said, don't make it. You're okay, we'll just refinance it. Well, guess what happened? She missed the monthly payment, and they sent her a foreclosure notice. The same company that told her you don't have to pay it. So I end up calling the company saying, please give this lady some straight answers, about what she can do. But you can understand a 70-year-old lady like that who was in tears over losing her husband, about to lose her home, what's the likelihood that she's going to call her local banker and say, I need to sit down in your office? It's just something that scares her. She stays away from it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Rufus. Thank you for your service on the Chicago Board of Education. We appreciate that very much.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for being here this morning, and thank you for your comments, the sobering comments on the housing crisis. It certainly tells us yet again why relying on property values and relying on property taxes is the wrong answer in supporting our schools and education. I want to ask you about a different matter, though. Given this continuum of violence, most recently with Northern Illinois, and certainly we can't forget about all the students who were killed in Chicago, what is the sense on the Hill of gun control and what we can do about that?
Well, I will just tell you, Dan Rostenkowski mentioned to you that I'm a downstater. And the issue of guns is a little bit different downstate than it is in the city of Chicago. And it reflects a cultural feeling that goes beyond, I think there's an image people have of gun owners that is not accurate. I live in a world where fathers consider it a rite of passage to take their son, even their daughter, out hunting. It's something their father did and they will do. They take great pride in what that means to their family. They have their guns safely stored. And it's the kind of thing where it's been part of my family history. It's part of many families across America. And whenever you talk about gun control, there are organizations, you know who I'm talking about, who twist that into the belief among those families that somebody is going to invade that cultural identity they have as reasonable, legal gun owners. And the issue just explodes. And so as a result, we end up with the extremes. The mayor is right, and I support him completely. Some of these gun dealers, should be put out of business. They do nothing but sell guns to be used in crime. What I've tried to do for the last several years is to have 100% tracing of crime guns in Illinois. It's hard. Every police chief can do it. There's a computer program to do it, just to feed in the information so we can figure out where these guns are coming from. The number one state supplying crime guns to the state of Illinois is, anybody? Mississippi. Huh? Yes. Lax gun laws, trunk loads of guns coming up the interstates into the state of Illinois. Why? Why in the world do we put up with that kind of stuff? Why do we let some suburban gun dealer be the gun supplier of choice to the Chicago gangs? I mean, that is ridiculous. And we have a situation where some in Congress, at least up to this point, have forced us to destroy records about wrongdoing by gun dealers within 48 hours to protect their privacy before the law enforcement people can get their hands on them and use them. That kind of madness has to stop. I see the mayor today is going to say something about trigger locks, another great and important issue. But let me say one word if I can, and I know I'm holding you over for a second, about NIU. 300 million guns are out on the streets in America today, 300 million. This notion that we are somehow going to reduce that dramatically, I think is a pipe dream. It just isn't going to happen. But there's a bigger issue here, and it's a tougher issue here, and it affects your job with the schools. How many of us know somebody, some young boy or girl, young man or woman, accepted to college, who goes off to college and for the first time in their lives exhibits signs of serious mental illness? I know that story. I know families just like that. Kid named Gary, I knew his mom and dad forever, saw him grow up, everything looked just fine. He went off to Northern 25 years ago and went over the deep edge and had to leave school. When you talk to people who are in the business of running colleges and universities, they say they're out of the protection of their family, they're in a brand new environment, and things click. They're at an age where they may need help. In the worst case, they commit suicide. Suicide, unfortunately, is a phenomena at colleges and universities. What a president of a major university said to me Saturday night was, he said, but in the old days, the tragedy was they would take their lives. Now, I don't know why, but the tragedy is compounded. They want to take other people with them. And I don't know if it's video games or violence or whatever it is, But it now has become a serious problem with a discrete group of people going into colleges and university that are playing out with the tragedy that we saw at NIU and DeKalb. So here's the issue. The federal law says you cannot buy a gun if you've been judged to be incompetent, mentally incompetent, or mentally dangerous. So you need a court to make that decision. What about all the others? What about those that are unstable and potentially dangerous? How do we learn their identities, and how do we bring them into a system so that they don't obtain firearms? This is a tricky question. If you don't handle this right and create a penalty for seeking help for mental illness, the net result is people will stop going. Many will. Oh, I'm not going to go see that counselor. And next thing you know, they'll take away my car. You know, I know what that's all about. So you don't want to create that mentality. And you also have to protect privacy. And you have to have lines that we can draw and enforce. So it is not easy. I don't know the shooter at NIU, and he obviously had some history, but we've got to be very careful in this area. The last point I'll make on this is the following. Mental illness is an illness. It is not a curse. It can be treated successfully and is treated successfully over and over every single day. And we have to encourage health insurance plans to cover it, and we have to be more open-minded. Steve Cochran on WGN is a strong voice for this, and I applaud him for doing that. But this is a complex issue, as you can tell, of bringing security to campus when we're vulnerable, because that young grad student could go buy 2 guns at a Champaign, Illinois gun dealer and come up and kill these kids. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate being at the City Club.